On the morning of April 7, 1994, the sky over Memphis, Tennessee was clear. It promised a routine day for the pilots and crew of FedEx Express Flight 705. A McDonnell Douglas DC-10 sat on the tarmac, a workhorse of the cargo world, built to carry heavy loads across the country. 3 crew members in the cockpit: Captain David Sanders, First Officer James Tucker, Flight Engineer Andrew Peterson, experienced professionals running pre-flight checks, unaware this flight would test their courage to the absolute limit. The cargo hold, stacked with electronic equipment, but the plane carried one more person: Auburn Calloway, a jump seat passenger. He sat quietly behind the cockpit, clutching a guitar case. The crew greeted him, finished checks, guided the massive plane onto the runway. Engines roared to life. Flight 705 lifted into the quiet morning, a silver giant against a blue sky. As the plane climbed, normalcy filled the cockpit. Crew chatted about family and plans, engines a comforting hum. Below, the world woke up, unaware of the drama above. But inside Calloway's mind, a storm was brewing. He carried a dark secret and a horrifying plan. The guitar case, not for music but for the tools of his fury. The calm morning was a thin veil overcoming terror. The fate of 4 individuals hung by a thread, and that thread was about to snap. Who was Auburn Calloway? On the surface, he was a successful and respected pilot. He had served in the United States Navy and was an expert in martial arts. At FedEx, he was a flight engineer, qualified to fly the same type of DC-10 he was now a passenger on. He was 42 years old, married, with a family. To his colleagues, he appeared to be a competent and professional aviator, someone you could trust in the cockpit. He had a good job and a stable life. But beneath this calm exterior was a man in deep trouble. Calloway's problems began with a lie. He had not been honest on his FedEx job application about his previous flying experience in the Navy. The company eventually discovered this discrepancy. They launched an investigation, and Calloway knew his career was in jeopardy. He was scheduled to attend a hearing at FedEx headquarters in Memphis the very next day, April 8th. He was almost certain he would be fired. For a man who had built his identity around being a pilot, the thought of losing his wings was devastating. It was a blow to his pride and his livelihood. The potential loss of his job was a huge source of stress, but it was also a financial catastrophe for him. He felt trapped, cornered by his own mistake. This sense of persecution began to twist his thinking. The trigger for Auburn Calloway's extreme anger was his belief that he was a victim. He saw the impending hearing not as a consequence of his own actions, but as a personal attack. In his mind, FedEx was a faceless corporation that was about to ruin his life over what he might have considered a small lie from his past. This feeling of injustice festered, growing stronger as the date of the hearing approached. He felt powerless against the giant company, and this powerlessness fueled his rage. He wanted to strike back, to hurt the company that he felt was hurting him. He wanted to make them pay for the career and reputation he was about to lose. His plan was born from this consuming anger and a cold, calculated logic. He knew that if he died in a work-related accident, his family would receive a substantial life insurance payout from FedEx, worth about $2.5 million. This was a fortune that would secure his family's future, something he felt he could no longer do if he was fired. So, he devised a plan to hijack the plane and crash it. He needed the crash to look like an accident, not a suicide. This meant he had to eliminate the flight crew. If he could take control of the plane and crash it, the investigation might never uncover the truth. To carry out his plan, Calloway prepared meticulously. He packed 2 claw hammers, a spear gun, and 2 mallets into his guitar case. He was not just planning a hijacking, he was planning a massacre. He intended to disable the cockpit voice recorder before the attack to erase any evidence of his actions. About 30 minutes after takeoff, as Flight 705 climbed through 19,000 feet, Auburn Calloway decided it was time to act. He had waited for the plane to reach a high enough altitude, a point of no return. He unbuckled his seatbelt, picked up his guitar case, walked silently toward the cockpit. The crew was relaxed and focused, unaware of the danger. Calloway entered the cockpit. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. He was a fellow aviator. His presence wasn't immediately alarming. Then, in an instant, the calm shattered. Without a word, he opened his guitar case, revealed 2 hammers, and struck. He hit Flight Engineer Andrew Peterson in the back of the head. He then turned on First Officer James Tucker. Captain David Sanders turned, stunned. Calloway lunged at the captain, striking him multiple times. The cockpit became chaos. The hum of engines lost to the struggle. Calloway was relentless and savage. A large man, trained in martial arts, he swung to kill. He aimed for their heads to incapacitate them quickly. His goal? Take control and fly the plane into the FedEx superhub near Memphis. But he had miscalculated. He underestimated their resilience. Despite grievous wounds, the crew fought back to survive. The swift attack turned into a desperate, bloody battle for control. The cockpit was a war zone with 4 men locked in life-or-death struggle. As the brutal assault continued, the plane began to fly erratically. With no one fully in command, the autopilot disengaged. The massive DC-10 started to buck and roll, responding to the physical struggle happening in the cockpit. First Officer James Tucker, despite a fractured skull and a severed temporal artery, managed to push himself back into his seat. He saw that the plane was in a dangerous climb. With blood pouring from his head, he grabbed the controls and pushed the nose down to avoid a stall. It was an act of pure instinct and, honestly, incredible bravery. He was flying the plane while simultaneously trying to fend off Calloway's relentless attack. Captain David Sanders, also severely injured, realized the gravity of the situation. He knew they had to get help. He reached for the radio and managed to send out a distress call. His voice, strained with pain and the effort of the fight, crackled over the airwaves.
Mayday, Mayday, we've had an attempted takeover on board.
The air traffic controllers on the ground were stunned. They could hear the sounds of the struggle in the background, shouts, grunts, the sickening thud of the hammers. They immediately understood this was not a typical emergency. They scrambled to clear the airspace around the stricken plane and guide it back toward Memphis. The flight engineer, Andrew Peterson, though gravely wounded, also played a crucial role. He managed to reach over and reset the cockpit voice recorder, ensuring that the entire horrifying event would be recorded. The struggle inside the cockpit was nothing short of heroic. The 3 crew members, bleeding and in immense pain, fought back with everything they had. Calloway was strong and determined, 1 man against 3. James Tucker, the first officer, a former Navy pilot. He knew extreme maneuvers could throw an opponent off balance. Tucker wrestled with the controls, putting the DC-10 through rolls and dives. He was using the plane itself as a weapon against Calloway. Captain Sanders joined the fight, helping hold Calloway back. The space was cramped, filled with sensitive instruments and controls. At one point, Tucker put the plane into a steep dive. The G-forces pinned everyone to the floor. That maneuver temporarily subdued Calloway, buying a few precious seconds. Then Tucker pulled the plane into a sharp climb. The climb caused weightlessness that sent everyone floating. The violent aerobatics endangered the aircraft, but it was their only chance. Andrew Peterson, the flight engineer, managed to get out of his seat. He grabbed the spear gun Calloway had brought. He aimed at Calloway but couldn't get a clear shot amid the chaos. The battle raged on, a brutal hand-to-hand fight for survival. Calloway was relentless as the plane twisted and turned through the sky. He wanted to complete his mission, but the crew's will to live was stronger. They were no longer just pilots. They were warriors defending their lives and their aircraft. The cockpit was a scene of unimaginable horror. Blood covered the instrument panels, yet through the pain and terror the crew worked together. Their shared determination to survive was the only thing standing between Auburn Calloway and his deadly plan. In the midst of the chaos, First Officer James Tucker's actions were particularly extraordinary. He was flying a plane that was dangerously overweight for landing, performing maneuvers that bordered on suicidal. He had a skull fracture, leaving his right side partially paralyzed. He couldn't use his right hand or foot properly. He flew the jet mostly with his left hand. Blood blurred his vision. Yet, he never gave up control. He knew lives depended on him, and he refused to let them down. Captain Sanders, despite severe head injuries, took on co-pilot and bodyguard roles. He helped Tucker with controls when he could, but focused on keeping Calloway away. He put himself between the attacker and the pilots. It was a selfless act of leadership. He understood that as long as Tucker could fly, they had a chance. The captain's resolve, even as he weakened from blood loss, gave others strength. Flight engineer Andrew Peterson was instrumental. After resetting the cockpit voice recorder, he joined the physical fight. He helped hold Calloway down during extreme G-force maneuvers. His actions prevented another attack on the pilots. Each crew member had a role and performed it flawlessly. They became a single unit with one goal: get the plane down safely. Their teamwork reflected their training and courage. Not one hero, but 3 men becoming heroes together, each making sacrifices and risking their lives for each other. With Auburn Calloway finally subdued by the extreme G-forces and the crew's relentless defense, James Tucker and David Sanders focused on the impossible task: landing the plane. They had managed to turn the aircraft back toward Memphis International Airport, but they were in a dire situation. The plane was still heavy with fuel meant for a cross-country flight, making it far above the safe landing weight. The complex systems needed for an automated landing had been damaged in the fight, or were covered in blood. They would have to land the plane manually. First Officer Tucker, still flying mostly with one hand, began the descent. His vision was severely impaired, and the pain was excruciating. Captain Sanders called out airspeed and altitude readings, acting as Tucker's eyes and hands. They had to land a massive aircraft, a damaged aircraft and an overweight aircraft with brute force and skill. The approach was fast and unstable. Emergency vehicles, fire trucks, ambulances, their flashing lights, a grim welcome party. As the plane descended, the crew had one final struggle. Calloway, who they thought was incapacitated, began to stir again, making a last, desperate attempt to seize control. The crew had to fight him off, while simultaneously managing the most critical phase of the flight. Against all odds, James Tucker brought the DC-10 down onto the runway. The landing was hard, but the plane held together.